All right, good afternoon. The Tuesday of crossover week. Hi, everyone. I am Delegate Janelle Wilkins, Chair of the Election Law Subcommittee. The date is March 14th, 2023, and I am calling our meeting to order at 4:21 p.m. We have two bills that we are looking at today and hoping to get them, at least one of them voted out or in the full committee today. And we are going to start with HB 979, Municipal Elections, Candidates, Reports of Donations and Disbursements. This bill requires municipalities to require candidates for office to file reports of disbursements and donations, and for SBE to make the report available. So basically more of sort of transparency for our local elections that take place, our city level elections that take place. And there are amendments to this bill. Stan, if you can take us through the amendments. I believe the reprint was sent out to everyone.
Yes, it was. Yeah, the amendments basically are designed to try to provide an alternative for small municipalities and candidates who may not be spending very much or at all in their campaigns. So there's basically two provisions, and these are both options that a municipality could adopt if it chose. So the first one is that a candidate, when they file for municipal office, could file an affidavit saying that they will not spend more than $1,000 in personal funds or accept contributions. If they file that affidavit, then they would be excused from having to file any reports of donations and disbursements. So that's one option a municipality could adopt. Another one is that in lieu of any particular report of donations and disbursements, the municipality could allow a candidate to file an affidavit saying that during the reporting period, they did not spend more than $1,000 or accept more than $1,000 in contributions. So the municipality could do either or both of those things. And both of those provisions are modeled on current provisions in state law. So for candidates for party central committees, they can file an affidavit saying that they will not accept more than $1,000 or that they will not spend more than $1,000 in personal funds or accept contributions, and then they don't have to file campaign finance reports. So that's a current provision in state law for central committee candidates, party central committee candidates. And then, as you all may know, for any candidate, if you didn't spend or raise more than $1,000 during the reporting period, you can file an affidavit in lieu of a campaign finance report. So those are the amendments.
Thank you, Stan. We don't have Mr. Demarinis on yet, but hopefully he'll be able to join us. I didn't realize that current law, we can file beforehand that you won't spend $1,000.
So that's only for candidate.
Mm-hmm.
That's only for party central committee candidates. That's a special provision just for candidates for party central committees.
Okay, so the beforehand that they're able to do.
Exactly.
And then if you do go unexpectedly over the 1,000, it just triggers the filing that you have to do.
Yes, that's right. And then the bill also includes that amendment as well, that if a candidate, promised that they wouldn't spend more than $1,000 in personal funds or accept contributions, but then subsequently did so, they would have to file the reports.
Got it. Thank you. Delegate Feldmark, then Delegate Griffith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Stan, for walking us through this. I guess I just have maybe a couple of clarification questions. So if a candidate files the affidavit up front saying they don't plan to spend more than $1,000 and or accept contributions at all,
That's
that
correct? That is correct.
So if a candidate files an affidavit saying they don't plan to spend more than $1,000 or accept contributions, and then they end up accepting a contribution, but still spend less than $1,000 total, right, with all contributions plus their own funds, they would file another affidavit saying they spent less than 1,000 or raised and spent less than 1,000, but there would still it would still just be 2 affidavits. Is that correct?
Yeah, if the municipality adopted both of these provisions, then yeah, that is correct. They could do that. Mhm.
Okay. Okay, so if it's under $1,000, they could require disclosure or they could choose not to.
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
But any jurisdiction can do this, not just the super small ones.
That's true. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Okay. Oh, Delegate Attar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know MML had concerns. Does this address any of their concerns? I know they're on
Yes.
here. Maybe they can answer.
Justin, are you there? Can you share if there are any outstanding concerns that MML has with the?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. MML's concerns under this bill as amended still remain to some degree, and that's in terms of administrative burden on the smaller jurisdictions in particular, the ones that have population thresholds under 300. In our written testimony, we state what seems to be a plain evolution of these laws in local jurisdictions where as they grow in complexity and budget size, you see jurisdictions take on these types of requirements on their own. In Port Tobacco, for example, with 18 residents, I just don't know that this is solving a problem. So we're still concerned.
That is helpful, but for a place like that, it sounds like it would be probably a bunch of affidavits of either no contributions or under 1,000. So they would just have to add, these however many people they have on their council have filed the affidavit. Is that right?
Yes, I think that's right.
Is it the
Most likely
website?
outcome.
So Justin, is it the website addition that is or sending the information over to SBE? What is the heavy burden in that situation in terms of just reporting basically a bunch of affidavits of no reporting?
So if it is just the affidavits, I think that's less of a stress than the administrative burden is really only on adopting the campaign finance report mechanism. I mean, honestly, they'll still have to be prepared for a candidate that does raise a little bit of money. And again, they're not representing thousands of people like a central committee or state seat, but just because the affidavit's an option doesn't mean it's going to be the only thing that takes place. Someone raises $1,050, they've got to be prepared to undertake this. And that's with volunteer and part-time staff in some of these smaller jurisdictions.
Right. So maybe SBE can help them with creating some kind of template, some easy way to do it for us to maintain that transparency. That's a fair point. Thank you, Justin. Delegate Griffith and Delegate Fair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are we on the amendment or on the bill as amended?
We're just having general discussion. We haven't adopted
Okay.
amendments yet, so you are free to talk about anything related to the bill or the amendments.
Sure, I certainly share MML's concerns. I look at some of the smaller jurisdictions. I look at Burkittsville and Frederick County has 142 folks. I look in Charles County, I was at Port Tobacco, 18, that's particularly small. In Prince George County, Eagle Harbor with 67 folks, Highland Beach and Anne Arundel County with 118, Barnesville and Montgomery County with 144. And we have some very, very small municipalities. And the concern is, and what I'm trying to unpack, is how much of this burden falls on the municipality. If the whole thing gets pushed under SBE, right, 100% responsibility, and the municipalities have no responsibility for tracking or reporting or staffing or website, any of that, and I think that's fine. But to, create new task responsibilities, potential expenses for very, very small municipalities, I do think is an undue burden on some of these smaller folks. I'm not talking about large municipalities, but particularly the small ones. And I want to make sure this is equitable across all the municipalities. So is there a way because the physical note says there's no impact on municipalities. I'm not sure that's quite right. Is there any way we could try to unpack what that physical impact would be on municipalities? I think that's something we need to understand.
I think Justin just gave us some of it. Justin, do you want to respond at all to the question about the potential fiscal impact and just reiterate what some of the challenges for municipalities?
Sure. Right now, unfortunately, it's a little bit of a unknown to us. We know that there is going to be a cost associated with the actual adoption of the system itself. I haven't gotten estimates on what kind of procedure it would take for an ordinance like that to go through. Obviously, we got some technical assistance that would be helpful. But then the administration is going to vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, depending on the type of campaign finance that system that they adopt. Do they do quarterly reporting? Do they do, one report? Depending on how they adopt it, and then what candidates ultimately decide to do in terms of how much they want to raise or spend personally or for other people, the costs can vary. So it's a little bit hard to say.
Madam Chair, can I just mention quickly, is it okay if I add something here?
Sure.
So the bill does say on page 2, lines 20 to 22, at the request of a municipality, the state board shall provide advice and training to the municipality on the implementation of the bill. So just want to mention that.
Sure.
That's
Madam Chair,
helpful.
may I? I'm sorry, I think that's certainly helpful, advice and training, but it doesn't cover the cost or even identifying. I guess my concern is I don't want to implement, I support the principle of the bill, absolutely. I think we should have transparency in what we receive and what we spend. I completely support the idea of the bill. My only concern, especially with smaller municipalities, is imposing a potential mandate, unfunded mandate to these folks without even knowing what that is. And training implementation is certainly helpful, but what's going to be the ongoing cost? Is it going to be that hire a person? Some of the physical notes have half a person, whatever that means. Is there a website, things of that nature? I mean, for me, I would feel more comfortable voting, knowing what we're actually asking of these municipalities. Unless SB is willing to take the whole thing under their umbrella, which I would certainly support.
Well, Delegate, somehow or another, these cities, whether they're 18 people or 100 people or 20,000 people, they are somehow running an election. An election is taking place, and there's somehow, whether it's volunteers, whatever the cost is, whoever is running it, how it's taking place, they are somehow finding the wherewithal and the resources to run some kind of election where the voters are deciding who is going to elect them. And all this bill is saying is that as another part of your election process, I'm sure that there are rules that are established on how their elections work, that there has to be this transparency. I am not hearing anything that is pointing to some kind of excessive amount of fiscal responsibility, some excessive amount of administrative burden. There is a little bit more, but somehow or another, these cities are finding the resources and the time and the people to be able to run an election. So I think if we say on top of that, share some information around how the donations and disbursements are taking place, that to me doesn't sound like an undue burden. Now, around the population, the challenge is, and we learned this last session around the bill, and Stan just reminded me that what we apply to one city, we have to apply to all. So it would be great, maybe we could have said, population over 500, 1,000, something like that. I actually would like to entertain that, because I understand a city of 18 people, maybe we don't necessarily really feel strongly about needing that information. But unfortunately, the way that we have to operate based on the Constitution is that when we apply to one city, we do have to apply to all of them equally. So we're not going to be able to do that. It's kind of all or none situation.
Can I ask one last question, Madam Chair? I guess my last question is there an opportunity, and this will certainly slow the bill up maybe by a day or so, because I'm sure we're going to meet multiple times this week. Is there a chance for MML to come back with any type of estimates on what this would impact, particularly smaller municipalities? Again, I just don't want to push this forward but having no information on exactly what that would even an estimate of what that would be.
So because it's crossover week, if this was a little earlier, this is just when the bill's coming to committee, that would be fine. But right now, there's no plan for us to meet again. Right now, it could change. So we do want to move forward on this. And I'm still not really hearing anything that is pointing to some kind of undue fiscal burden. I don't know if Delegate Griffith, there's something that you're hearing from your cities or from what Justin has shared, but I'm not really hearing anything that points to a super serious fiscal burden. But Delegate Fair, did you still have a question?
My question was answered with Delegate Griffith's question. Wait, and I will point out, and I want to thank him because we have numerous municipalities in Frederick County that number in just a few hundred. So I do appreciate his outlining of that concern.
Fair for fair. I'm sure it's the first time you've gotten that, Delegate Fair. So with that, how about we just adopt the amendments? Again, the amendments are just providing the opportunity for the affidavits to hopefully alleviate some of the burden on some of the smaller cities. So why don't we adopt the amendments and we can continue any further discussion.
Move the amendments.
Second.
Right, it's been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion, further discussion on the amendments? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of the amendments to, I lost my bill number, to HB 979, please raise your hand or say aye. Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it unanimously. We have adopted the amendments to HB 979. Now, on the bill as amended, I definitely hear some of the concern and the discomfort around potential fiscal impact. And unfortunately, we are not able to amend out any cities, but we'll take the motion, and then if there's any further discussion, we can discuss further.
Move favorable.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and properly seconded. HB 979 as amended. Any further discussion? Okay, well, seeing no further discussion, all those, sorry. Delegate Griffith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I just want to be very, very clear. I support the intent of the bill 100%. I just don't want to vote for it until and I'm not comfortable voting for the bill and opposing this on municipalities until I understand more of what we are asking and putting on the municipalities. So at least at this time, I'm going to be voting no. So thank you, Madam Chair, for your hard work on this.
Thank you, Delegate Griffith. We understand and appreciate that. Justin, are you able to follow up with the committee with any fiscal impact the next day? We're still going to vote this, but maybe we might be able to bring Delegate Griffith over if we get some financial information.
I can reach out to a handful or a dozen small town administrators and see if I can get an estimate in that kind of time frame for them. I can't promise you I will, but I can promise you I'll try.
All right, great. We moved and seconded. Okay, we're on discussion. Delegate Feldmark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the concern that's been raised, but I guess, to my thinking, transparency around campaign finance is pretty fundamental from my perspective. And I guess it seems to me that in these very small municipalities, it is more likely that the expenditures in an election are also going to be smaller. And hopefully the affidavit can cover that. I think it's an important principle to move forward and important to bring that transparency to these elections. And, if we discover issues, we can continue to refine the process, but I'd hate to, not move forward with increasing transparency.
Thank you, Delegate. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of HB 979 as amended, raise your hand or say aye. All right, all those opposed? All right, Delegate Griffith, Delegate Miller, the ayes have it. HB 979 moves forward as amended to full committee, and we hope to have it on the vote list later today. Our last bill is one that is for discussion. This is HB 563, General Assembly Vacancy, Political Party Central Committees Procedures. This bill basically puts forward some requirements on central committees when it comes to how and the process for filling vacancy appointments. So it includes things like the application process. It has to be open for 7 days. It has requirements about posting the application, holding at least one public meeting, and various other provisions are included in the bill. So I wanted to just talk through this bill a little bit for us to consider it. Delegate Griffith.
So as the co-sponsor of the bill, I actually get to support an election law bill. I'm very excited about this. So I have worked with the Republican State Party chair in this bill, went through a number of things. A lot of the bill matches the bylaws of the Republican Party already has for their appointments. The State Party chair only had one point they weren't happy with, and I think in Annapolis, if there's only one part of a bill you're unhappy with, that's a win. So whatever it's worth, and they did not submit any testimony in opposition, so whatever that's worth.
Awesome to hear. Are you able to share what part that was?
Sure. The only part was the open ballot. Fine with the timelines. We were able to work on some language about the publication of the availability, because obviously some of the central committees don't have technology available to them to be able to publish on their website, things like that. So we were able to massage some language there. Obviously, in the Republican bylaws, it says it's recommended that you may recuse yourself. The language in this is a must, and I think that's the right thing to do. When I got appointed, I recused myself from my process. So I worked at the State Party there. They were generally okay with that. The other thing was the open ballot, transparent ballot part. I personally think that's the right thing to do. We do that down here, obviously, when voting on the things we vote on. That's the only thing there's some pushback on, but it wasn't stiff resistance, whatever that's worth.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. I mean, one area that I do feel a little bit concerned about is the not voting for yourself provision. It seems very prescriptive for us as a legislature. It just seems like maybe a little too much. But Delegate Feldmark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a few questions about this bill, and I guess they're really sort of questions about the process that to me don't seem to be addressed in the bill, and maybe they are, and I'm missing how they're addressed. But I think there's differences among central committees from county to county, as well as from party to party, right? But so some, there are central committee members from this specific district, and in some counties, it's just the central committee as a whole. So I wasn't sure how that difference sort of relates to these provisions, and also wondering about how we take into account seats that span more than one central committee. So those are sort of broader questions, but I wasn't sure how this bill would impact either of those scenarios.
Can you say the first one again? I missed that. You said
so in some counties, for instance, in Baltimore County, right, there are central committee members for the district, right? Whereas in Howard County, the central committee is at large. Right. And so all of the central committee is at large to the county. So I don't, when we look at I appreciate trying to give more structure to the procedures, but I'm not sure how that relates to those differences.
Those are good points. Stan, do you want to respond? If there's anything in the bill that you want to flag that relates to that? And then Delegate Griffith, looked like you had your hand up, and Delegate Fair.
Sure, yeah, I think the bill doesn't specifically address the distinction between a district central committee and a central committee for the whole county. I think it's implied that whatever central committee is filling the vacancy, that's what the requirements would apply to. Yeah, and I think to the other question, yeah, her other question was about the, I'm sorry, what was the other question? I lost my
For
track.
a seat that spans across 2 counties and has 2 central committees involved in the process.
Yes, yeah, I think these requirements would apply to both in the same manner if they were both involved in filling the vacancy.
But if a meeting is required, would they need to do a meeting in both counties?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Delegate Griffith and then Delegate Fair.
Just to answer that question, from my understanding of, it's been a little while since I've really dug into the bill, but the bill would only require 1 meeting to be held. Well, obviously, there's 2 different central committees voting on. Then each central committee will have to have their own vote the same way. Nothing's going to change in that process, but it does require the meeting to happen in a county that holds that district's in, right? So like for my district covers Hartford and Cecil, the Hartford County meeting must happen in Hartford County and the Cecil County meeting must happen in Cecil County. The Hartford County meeting could happen in Baltimore County, for example. I'm not sure what problem it's trying to fix. I'm not sure that's something that's happened with the Democrat Central Committee at some point. That doesn't happen on the Republican Central Committee. So for us, that was not an issue, but it doesn't affect those processes, just the actual elections, really. So.
Delegate Fair.
Thank you. And I'm usually not a big fan of getting really overly prescriptive in legislation because I like to leave some leniency for folks to figure things out. But I'm struggling with page 2, lines 15 through 21 about posting applications submitted to the Central Committee because it's extremely vague. And so I'm trying to figure out what the intent behind it'll be posted online promptly after receipt by the County Central Committee. But online could mean anything from the website to a Facebook profile, to a Facebook, to a anything in between. And so I obviously I'm a big fan of transparency and making sure that we keep these applications open to the public so people are able to see who's applying for the positions, and that the actual posting of the position opening is also very accessible for folks to be able to be encouraged to apply. Delegate Griffith, could you possibly help me out here?
I'm Chair.
Mm-hmm.
That was revised to be deliberately vague. It was a little more prescriptive initially. The reason why is because in some of our rural counties that aren't very well funded, their central committees are very, technology that don't have the same technological sophistication. We want to give them a wide berth as long as it's made online, electronically, publicly available. Some have websites, some don't, some have Facebook, some do. And obviously some of the counties that are more robust have, more ability to do that. So it was really trying to be less prescriptive deliberately to allow a wide variety of options to meet that criteria. And the most important part of this is transparency. So those applications can be public. And, I think the bill accomplishes that.
Okay, it sounds like there are a few things that we would need to work out in this bill, especially to make sure that it applies and makes sense for all of the central committees and the situations in different county central committees. So we'll chew on it a little bit and potentially bring this back up, but this discussion was super helpful. There's maybe some aspects that are vague that we might want to tighten up, and then also looking at some provisions that we may want to make some amendments to. But thank you for the great discussion. Thank you, Delegate Griffith, for the bipartisan work. We're excited about that. And I think with that, that ends the work in our subcommittee for today. It's possible anything can come up. We may meet again, but right now there is not a plan for that at this moment. All right. Okay. So there we have it. We are